We're going to go ahead and jump into the Word in Luke chapter 17. Turn this. Luke 17, we happen to see a story that we have all heard and read more than likely countless times. It is the story of the 10 lepers. Verse 11 says this, "And it came to pass as he went to Jerusalem, he being Jesus, that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered into a certain village, there met him 10 men that were lepers, which stood afar off." Everybody say, stood afar off. I want you to take note of that. These lepers were required to stand far away from people that were clean. That was the protocol. That was what they were supposed to do. They were forced away from their families, their cities, everyone that they knew and everyone that they loved. They had to stay a certain distance away. Sounds like COVID. Got to stand 6 feet away. And Brother Peters, is that what you were nodding your head back? They had to stand a certain distance away from people. And they lifted up their voices and said, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." And when he saw them, he said unto them, "Go show yourselves unto the priests." And it came to pass that as they went, they were cleansed. And one of them, when he saw that he had been healed, turned back and with a loud voice glorified God. And he fell down on his face at his feet. So he went from a great distance, a distance standing afar off, to at his feet. Notice there's a change in the separation. At his feet, giving him thanks, and he was a Samaritan. The leper broke social conventions in the law in his desperate attempt to get help. You know, they weren't supposed to go close to people until they were verified by the priest that, okay, you're clean now. And more than likely, you were never clean unless you came in contact with Jesus. He broke the protocol. Regulations governing those suffering from leprosy required that they keep distance from those who were not afflicted. So what brought this man back to Jesus? His desperation, maybe his lack of hope, because he's still not 100% sure that whenever he makes it to the priest, that the priest is going to give him the check off, going to give him the go-ahead at home. He had heard the name of Jesus. Verse 13 says, "And they lifted up their voices and said, 'Jesus, Master, have mercy on us.'" They knew who this man was. They understood who he was. They had heard the stories of the miraculous. He knew the stories of what Jesus had done, and his faith brought him closer to God. Verse 17 says, "And Jesus answered, said, Were there not 10 cleansed? But where are the 9? There are not found that return to give glory to God, save this stranger. And he said unto him, Arise, go thy way. Thy faith hath made thee whole." Amen. This man experienced something he had never experienced before. He felt the healing power of Christ move upon him. His life had been completely changed whenever he was diagnosed with leprosy, however they diagnosed things back then. I imagine that's a pretty stunning diagnosis. A lot of us, we tend to get scared with different diseases right now. The big thing is COVID. I tested positive for COVID. Just pray. We have been incredibly blessed with this virus. We've talked about it multiple times, and I think we should continue to talk about it. We had a big hit last year, but everybody that had it is back in church. Amen. I'm thankful to see that. So this man, he was diagnosed with this disease, leprosy. It's this disease, that bacteria that works its way into your body, and your skin begins to fall off and your limbs begin to fall off. It's disgusting, really. It's a terrible thing. But he was healed. He was cleansed. He was healed from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. But he wanted more. He wanted more than just to be at a distance from Jesus. He wanted to greet and worship this man named Jesus. He had heard the stories. He wanted to be within close proximity of the master of the universe, the man that had brought the dead back to life, the man whom the wind and waves obeyed him, the man that had fed the 5,000. That's who he wanted to be close to, because he had heard these stories. And being afar off wasn't good enough for him. His healing, a lot of people would have taken their healing and gone on their way. In fact, 9 out of 10 people would have taken their blessing and their healing and gone on their way. But no, this man said, I want something more. He knew that he had been healed of leprosy, but he also knew he was in need of more. So what was the answer? What was his best option? To get closer. I'm going to preach to you for a few moments on the subject, the distance between. The distance between. Notice with me that scripture that verse 10 says they were cleansed in verse 19. Then in verse 19, Jesus says, arise, go thy way, thy faith had made thee whole. What is the difference between cleansed and made whole? It is the distance between. The distance between you and the distance between Jesus. That's the difference between. Jesus was having a conversation with the disciples at one point. He made a number of predictions. Firstly, he predicted that when he died, the disciples would run away. Mark 14, verse 27 says, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. Secondly, he predicted his resurrection. In Mark 14, verse 28, after I have risen, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. But the disciples failed to understand what he was telling them. Thirdly, and finally, he said something that clicked with them a little bit. They didn't understand the first two things he predicted. It was way over their head. They had no idea what he was talking about. They didn't catch on to it. But thirdly, he finally says something that they understand. Well, they thought they understood. In Mark 14, verse 30, and Jesus said unto him, this is Peter, verily I say unto thee, that this day, even this night, before the cock crows twice, you shall deny me thrice. Peter was indignant. He was angry. He was frustrated. He began to argue with Jesus. No, not me. In the NDT, the New Dustin translation, I would translate it something like, man, you got the wrong one. I ain't the one. I'm not going to do it. He told Jesus, he said, I will die with you. I will die with you before I betray you, before I deny you. All these men in this room, every one of us will die with you before we deny you. And just a few hours later, things changed. Luke records it like this. So Luke chapter 22, verse 54. Then took they him and led him and brought him into the high priest's house. And Peter followed, what's that say? Afar off. Peter followed afar off. And when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the hall and were set down together, Peter sat down among them. And this is the servants. The servants were in the hall and they had their own fire going. And Peter sat down with the servants instead of following Jesus being taken by the guards. But a certain maid beheld him as he sat by the fire and earnestly looked upon him and said, this man was also with him. And he denied him, saying, woman, I know him not. And after a little while another saw him and said, thou art also of them. And Peter said, man, I am not. And about the space of 1 hour after, another confidently affirmed, saying of a truth, this fellow also was with him, for he is a Galilean. And Peter said, man, I know not who thou sayest. And immediately why he spake, the cock crowed. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter. And Peter remembered the word of the Lord, and how he had said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And Peter went out and wept bitterly. The cowardice and faint-heartedness of Peter in this passage of Scripture, and I don't even like saying it like that. Peter, personally, for me, is one of my favorite Bible characters. He's one of my favorite people in the Bible. I'm not even remotely close to him, but I like to think that I am. I imagine this burly man who's just, you mess with him, you mess with his family, you mess with his friends, you mess with Jesus, and you're going to have a problem automatically. I don't know why. That's how I imagine him. So I hate to use the word that he was a coward. I don't like thinking about it like that. Whenever I think of Peter, I think of a man's man. If he wanted to stay clean-shaven, he'd have to shave 3 times a day. That's what I think of, kind of like my grandfather. He had to shave 2 or 3 times a day. I kid you not. So that's what I think of. I think of this amazing man, this man that whenever God bid him to come unto the water, he dared him to walk on the water. Actually, he dared himself, but he stepped out on the water and walked. In Matthew 14, verse 30 says, "But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid and beginning to sink, and he cried, saying, 'Lord, save me.' He became distracted by his surroundings, and it caused him to sink." This man is no coward because of the things that he's seen. He cut a man's ear off trying to watch out for Jesus. I probably would have done the same thing. Like, hey, dude, back up. You're choosing the wrong one today. That's what I think of whenever I think of Peter. But Peter followed afar off. They took Jesus, instead of following behind him closely, trying to save him, trying to figure out some way to intervene, he was almost skulking in the shadows, kind of, okay, where are they taking him now? Luke 22, verse 33 says, "And he said unto him, Lord, I am ready to go with thee, both into prison and to death. And yet he forsook him just as the rest did." Just as the rest did. He said, "Christ, I will die with you." But he forsook him. He followed at a distance. Sparks of love and concern for the master were there, undoubtedly, because as far as we know, he is the only one that really followed. So there was love there for Jesus. There was love there. But fear and concern for his own safety was his priority. Therefore, he followed afar off. In my mind, I can see some of us, myself included, at times being guilty in the charges of following afar off. And I'm going to put it to you like this: being quiet Christians. Being quiet Christians. Because that's exactly what Peter was doing here. He said, I don't know Jesus. I don't know who that is. I've never seen him in my life. How many times are we guilty of following afar off? Yeah, I'm a Christian, but leave it there. I haven't shared my testimony with anybody. I haven't told anybody what God has done in my life, what he's brought me through, what he's delivered me from. Am I following afar off? Am I following at a distance? There is danger in drawing back, in turning around and looking back. He followed him, but he went and sat with the servants. He should have gone up to the court and had something to say for Jesus. He should have appeared for him. He should have spoke up for him. But he sat with the servants by the fire. A nice warm fire, comfortable. He followed him, but it was really just to see the end. He was more curious than anything. He just wanted to see the end result. Led more by this curiosity than by his conscience. He attended as an idle spectator rather than a disciple, a person concerned. He followed at a distance, and it was that distance between him and Christ that led him to his denial. You can't tell me for a moment that had he stayed close to Jesus, that if he had followed them at a close distance, at a close proximity, that he would have denied him. It was that distance between them that caused him to say, I don't know who he is. I've never met him. I've never seen him. Not once, but 3 times he denied Jesus. And it was because of that distance, the distance between. In Exodus chapter 20, Moses receives the 10 Commandments. This was a big deal. This was not some minor event. This wasn't a staff meeting that could have been condensed into an email. This was a big deal. This was God giving them a message, literally writing on the wall, writing into the mountain what he wanted them to do, commanding them how to live their lives. And this, since it was a big deal, came with quite the show. It was a show that would make any concert with their lights and flames look like preschool recess. The power and the might on display was something not seen before. It was something to behold. Job 37 verses 11 says, he loads the clouds with moisture and he scatters his lightning through them. 2 Chronicles 20 verse 6, in your hand are power and might, so that none is able to withstand you. This is talking about Jesus. He determines the numbers of the stars. He gives all of them their names. Great is our Lord and abundant in power. His understanding is beyond measure. Psalm 147 verse 4 and 5. You don't have to look very far to understand the power and the might of Jesus. His strength, his power, his majesty. It's something that we cannot even begin to fathom. The children of Israel were getting a better idea of the power of God. Imagine having seen the 10 plagues being delivered, seeing the sea parted and walking on dry ground through the Red Sea. Being led by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. That's incredible. That's powerful. That you're being led by God in the middle of the night through a massive pillar of fire. That would be amazing. If there's anything that I can, in my mind, can imagine, if I could go back to the Bible and see that, that's one of those, it's towards the top of the list. That would be amazing to see. But the children of Israel saw that, and they were still afraid of what they saw at the mountain. It makes me wonder, did they forget what God had done for them? Had they forgotten everything that they had just been delivered from? Had they forgotten? It hadn't been that long. They were only in the desert for 40 years. 40 years isn't long enough, presumably. Shouldn't be long enough for you to forget the miracles God has done for you. Did they forget what God had done, or was this a display far exceeding even what he had done already? What he was doing in the mountain as he was giving them the 10 Commandments, was this far exceeding even that pillar of fire? That's kind of what I'm thinking. That's kind of what I'm wondering. It filled them with fear. We use fear whenever we're talking about the Bible and Scripture as a respectful fear, but this wasn't the same fear. This was they were scared. They were not excited about it. So much so they didn't even want to talk to God anymore. They didn't even want to communicate with God. They wanted Moses to be the third man. They wanted Moses to be the middle man, the one to communicate for them. That's how scary this was. Exodus 20 is where we see this, 20 verse 18. And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood where? Afar off. They stood afar off. They stood at a distance. They saw the power of God, and they were so scared they couldn't even get close. That I got to pull myself away from that. I don't want anything to do with that. They wanted Moses to go for them. They said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. What they saw did not make them want to draw closer, clearly. But it made them want to discontinue communication with God altogether. They would rather hear from Moses than God. And verse 20 says, and Moses said unto the people, fear not, for God has come to prove you, and that this fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not. And the people stood afar off. There it is again. Stood afar off. And Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. The Bible doesn't go into deep description of what's happening here. It doesn't delve deep into the size of the lightning bolts that are streaking across the sky, how dark the darkness where God was. It doesn't say how dark it was. Was it foggy? Or was it something that just black? Just power. My mind is a little funny. I think you all know this. But that's what I'm wondering. What was happening here? I wish I could see the details. I'm a visual person. I want to see the details of what's happening here. So Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said unto Moses, Thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, Ye have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. I've talked with you, Moses, not them. Moses drew near to God. He did not see this as a fearful moment. He didn't have concern for his life. Instead, he saw an opportunity. He experienced the power of God, and he spoke with God. Mind you, not for the first time. But it was 13 chapters later in Exodus, chapter 33, verse 18, where Moses says, I beseech thee, show me thy glory. Show me thy glory. And this is after the experience he had on the mountain with the Ten Commandments and stepping into the darkness. He said, God, I've seen and experienced your power. I've seen amazing things. I've seen incredible, undescribable things. But there is something I have yet to experience, that is your glory. And God responds with this in Exodus 33, verse 21. Behold, there is a place by me. There is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon a rock. And this goes on, what begins to take place is God shows Moses his hinder parts, and Moses comes down from the mountain and his face is glowing. He's been completely changed. Why? Because he drew near. And when he drew near the first time, he wasn't completely satisfied. He said, I want more of God. There's too much distance between us. So what happened? He said, God, I want to see your glory. And because he talked to God, because he said, he sought him out, God said, there's a place by me. Will you come? Will you come? How much distance is between you and Jesus? How much distance is there between you? I hope not much. I hope not much. And I hope if there is any space at all that you have the desire to draw closer to God, that you have the desire to step into the presence of God like you've never experienced before. The children of Israel withdrew themselves. They saw some crazy stuff they couldn't explain. They became afraid, but Moses instead said, I got to check this out. I got to see what this is about. And all this was because of the willingness to seek God. Seek the glory of God that opened the invitation for him to come to a place and minimize the distance between. Psalm 119, verse 65 says this, Teth, thou hast dealt well with thy servant, O Lord, according unto thy word. Teach me good judgment and knowledge, for I have believed thy commandments. Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now have I kept thy word. Verse 67 says, Before I was afflicted, I went astray. Not that he willfully, wickedly, maliciously, or through contempt walked away from God. He didn't say, I'm fed up with this stuff and walked out. He didn't say, I've had enough of the presence of God. That's not what happened. That would contradict Psalms 18, verse 21. For I have kept the ways of the Lord, and I have not wickedly departed from my God. So clearly, he did not willfully walk away from God. But yet he says, I went astray. So what's happening here? What's going on? He didn't do this on purpose, but through the weakness of the flesh and the force of temptation. Temptation is a strong thing. Temptation is even stronger whenever you have your guard down. I'm one of those weird people. Whenever we go out in public, I'm watching everyone. I pay attention to every little thing. I'm watching everyone and their mother. Okay, what's he doing? Why is he walking so funny? And I have a story for you in a minute as to why I do that. My wife, whenever we first started dating, she wouldn't pay very much attention at all. We'd be sitting at the bank. I'd go in, I'd come out, and she'd be on her phone just texting away. And I'd sneak up to her window and scare her. About gave her a heart attack a few times. But I'm that guy. I want to pay attention to everything that's going on. So we can't let our guards down as Christians. We can't allow our guards to be set low. We can't allow our guards to go down as far as temptation and what the enemy is bringing against us. That was not in my notes, but okay. He wandered from the right before he even knew it because his guard was set low. Before I was humbled, as one scholar said, with the words of David, before I was humbled, before I was afflicted, I went astray. We often get the idea in our thick skulls that I can do this. I don't need any help. I can do this by myself. How many times have you heard that? Unfortunately, I've run into a lot of people with addiction of many kinds that I can do it. I can do it by myself. No, you need help. You need help to get through your addiction. And I need help to get through my temptation. I need the Lord to guide my way, to order my steps, in order for me to stay in His way, in order for me to stay close to Him. When you think those things, you're not an awful, terrible, evil person. I can do this by myself. You're not an awful person. You're just carnal. That's your flesh talking. You have stepped away from what God has for you. It's not willfully walking away. It's just getting off track, losing your focus. This is what happened with David. He let his guard down. For several years, I've trained in different martial arts. For one in particular was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Several years I've trained in it. And I'm not throwing kicks and nothing like that. I don't look all goofy. Well, to me. I found interest in it. I'm not punching people in the face. It's just staying safe, protecting myself, making sure if anybody gets crazy, which it did this week twice. Monday night, long story short, had a guy try to run from the police out of the hospital. Guess who was standing right in his way? He beelined for me. So I did my thing, got him on the ground, and they arrested him. I spent 2 hours sitting in the ER because I smacked my head. That's not why I was saying it and telling you the story. There's a purpose behind it. It was a wild moment. But in my lessons that I've learned, one lesson that is said almost every single class is this. You control the distance, you control the damage. You control the distance, you control the damage. If something happens, if somebody comes to attack you, if that guy he wasn't trying to hurt me, he was just trying to get away. If he tried to swing on me, guess what? I'm moving. Go ahead, bro. There's the door. Good luck. They got tasers, I don't. But if somebody's trying to do something to me, I, number one, either remove myself out of the situation. Something's going south, I need to remove myself, one. Or if I'm in a corner, just grab them and hold on to them. Because if I'm giving them a big old bear hug, they can't punch me. Sounds silly. But if you control the distance, you control the damage. And I want you to think about that whenever you're in life, whenever you're outside of these four walls, whenever you're at home by yourself, whenever you're with your friends and there's a temptation comes along, you control the distance, you control the damage. If I'll stay close to God, He's going to take care of me. If I stay close to God, He's going to protect me. If I stay close to God, He's going to bring me out of that situation. He's going to guide me. He's going to lead me. But only if I stay close to God, if I control the distance. I want to control the distance between God and I. Ecclesiastes 9 verse 2 says, all things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and to the clean, to the unclean, to him that sacrificeth and to him that sacrificeth not. Life happens. You're going to go through difficult situations. You're going to go through difficult trials. You're not special. I'm sorry. I'm not special. Bad things happen. But those things are easier to work through if we have Jesus. If we have Jesus with us, walking with us, talking with us. James 4 verse 8 says, draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. If I get closer to God, that's what he wants. He doesn't want us to stand off at a distance. He doesn't want us to try and communicate from a long ways away. He wants us right there. Get closer to God and he will get closer to you. Control the distance between you and Jesus. You control that distance and he will control the damage. There's nothing I can do in my circumstance. I can't change anything. But if I put it in the hands of God, things are going to work out. He's going to take care of me. He's going to provide for me. He never promised me ease. He never promised me to live on Easy Street, although I did live on Easy Street in Tennessee. He never promised things would be perfect. He just told us that he would take care of us. Just look at his life. He was loved for a moment. Then one of his disciples turned on him and got him killed. That's a great way to go, said no one. Look at Job, a man of God, that God himself took note that no one else loved him like Job did. He lost everything within a short amount of time. Literally, one person would come in, give him some bad news. They would walk out, and the next one would come in and give him the next bad news. He lost everything. I'm not going to make that joke. Help me, Lord. He lost everything. Paul, Pastor talked about it on Sunday. Paul, he was shipwrecked, bitten by a snake, imprisoned 3 times, and spent more than 5.5 years in prison. Not a great situation. Doesn't sound like a life of ease to me. 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 3, but the Lord is faithful, who shall establish you and keep you from evil. Who wrote that? Paul. Paul wrote that. Through everything that he'd been through. He said, but the Lord is faithful, who shall establish you and keep you from evil. Job 13, verse 15 says, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. But I will maintain mine own ways before him. Job said this long before the Lord brought him everything back. Long before everything was restored, and more so than he had originally, he said, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. He's saying whether or not he saves me, he's still God. It is the distance between that makes a difference. It is the distance between Jesus and I that makes the difference in my life and the strength that I have. If I turn this mic off and decided to talk like this the rest of the service, I'm going to put the mic back up because probably some of y'all are probably struggling. If I put this mic down and talked and spoke for the rest of the service without the mic, without the projection, you would probably, 1, get frustrated because I have a perfectly good mic here. Number 2, you'd probably want me to speak up, or you could all just move closer. It's the easier way. Just move closer. That's our relationship with God so many times. We expect God to speak up. Well, God, I can't hear you. Well, there's a reason the Bible says He's a still small voice. How am I supposed to hear God if I'm so far away from God? A few years ago, I taught a lesson in that lobby back there. Talked about hearing the voice of God. And it was such an awesome lesson. I remember the Spirit of the Lord moved in that place. And I want to hear the voice of God. I want to hear what He has for me. Amen. But how? How am I going to hear His voice if I'm not even close to Him? If I'm not close enough to hear Him in the first place? What stands between you and hearing the voice of God? Could it be the distance between? Unfulfilled miracles oftentimes are something that turn many away from God. How many times have you heard someone talk about how mad they are at God for not saving their family member? There's a lady I work with that her brother was killed several years ago in a car accident, and she's told me multiple times, that's why I don't go to church, because I'm mad at God. Why didn't he save him? That's not for me to answer. I don't know that answer. I don't know. I'm sorry. But so many people are driven away from God, walk away from God because their life isn't going the way they expected it to. Because, well, I expected this to happen. I wanted this to happen. And my family member was diagnosed with this, and God didn't save them, so I'm mad. So they walk away from God. Genesis 21, verse 16, we see Hagar was sent away with Ishmael. And she went and sat down over against him a good way off. She was a good way off. She was a good way off from her miracle. As it were a bow shot. And she said, let me not see the death of my child. Let me rephrase that for you. Let me not see the death of my miracle. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. And we know the story. The Lord comes and intervenes in the situation. But don't set your miracle afar off so you don't see it. Don't set it off to the side because it hadn't happened yet. Don't set it off to the side because things haven't changed yet. Keep that promise close to you. Don't forget the promise. Don't forget about the gift that God has given. It may have not come to fruition yet, but don't forget about it. Don't give up. Don't let your miracle die. She sat afar off from her miracle because she didn't want to see this child that God had given her. She didn't want to see him die. She didn't want to hear him cry. So she said, I'm going to draw away. Don't draw away from your miracle. Keep it close. God gave it to you for a reason. In Jesus' name. Keep him close. Only God's power works that miracle. I've already said it multiple times. There's nothing that we can do to change our situation, our circumstance. But trust God. Trust his power. Trust his will. Stay close to God. Our responsibility is to pray, but the weight of the outcome was never meant to be on our shoulders. I got to pray like it's up to God and work like it's up to me. Outside of that, there's nothing else that can be done differently. I got to pray like it's up to God and work like it's up to me. Do not stop asking God for help. People get frustrated. Well, God hasn't done it, so I guess I'll stop asking. I guess he didn't want it to happen. Timing is everything. Timing is absolutely everything. How many times have you prayed for one thing and months, maybe years later, then God gave it? God gave you the promise that you'd been asking for. I got to control the distance between, because if I allow distance between him, I'll allow distance between the miracles. I don't want distance between him. Jesus said in Mark 16, verse 18, they shall lay hands on the sick and they shall recover. It doesn't say make them well if you will make them well if your faith is strong enough. That's not what it says. Sometimes our plan and God's plan don't align. Sometimes we're outside of God's will when we pray. Don't stop praying, but stop praying outside of the will of God. Pray for the will of God. We preach miracles and signs and wonders. We preach revival around the world. But, my miracle, I think my miracle is a little too big for God. We preach revival around the world. Marion, this city's too far gone. I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. Whatever your miracle is, God can do it tonight. Whatever your situation is, God can perform it. This city is not too far gone to be saved. In Jesus' name. This city is not too far gone. I come into contact with people every single day that are desperate, that are searching for something. They're searching for drugs because they think that'll take away the pain. They drunk out of their mind. Had one guy who thought my radio was a taser last night. Thought my radio was a taser. He was so drunk. I'm so convinced that people, they're just looking for an escape from this world. They're looking for something different than what they have. They're looking for an escape from their situation and their circumstance. So what is the best place to go to? Whatever they have at hand. They don't even think about Jesus because they don't understand the difference that he can make in their life. And if we will let God, if we'll stay close to God ourselves, he will change the distance between us and them. I want to stay close to God so I can get close to them. Because I know if I'm not close to God and I get close to them, they're going to influence me in ways that I don't need to be influenced. But if I stay close to God and close to them, they're going to start coming to church. They're going to start asking questions. They're going to start seeking for something more than they already have. It's about bringing them in here to meet him. There's multiple distances. There's distance between me and him, and there's distances between them and him. It's my job to bring them here and meet Jesus. You really believe that God can save Paul, who was out to kill the disciples? That's what his goal was. That's what his life was about, was to kill Christians. But you don't believe that God can save a drug addict? You don't believe that God can save a prostitute? I'm sorry. I love to come into church and smell cigarettes. I love to come in here and smell the smell of alcohol on someone's breath, because that means we're doing something right. That means people are coming here to meet him. That means that people are deciding and they're recognizing, I need a change in my life. What separates you from your miracle? What separates FPC from an outrageous outpouring of God's Spirit in this city? The distance between you and Jesus. That's the difference. I got to hurry. Job 36, 24 and 25. Remember that thou magnify his work, which men behold. Every man may see it. Man may behold it afar off. You want to experience the power of God? Keep him close. You want a transformation in your marriage? Keep him close. You have needs that require a miracle, supernatural miracle. Keep him close, and especially if it's not his will, keep him close, because it will be tempting to doubt God. Keep him close. Psalm 145, verse 18 says, the Lord is nigh unto all them that call upon him, to all that call upon him in truth. He is just as close as the mention of his name. As the mention of his name. But do I call on his name regularly? Do I call on his name every day? Or do I just wait to call on his name Sunday and Wednesday? I want to fix the distance between me and Jesus. And I'm closing with this. Habakkuk chapter 4, verse 16 says, let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help him in time of need. I want to go before the throne of grace. I want to stand in his presence.